You're standing on a cliff. The ground behind you is everything you've ever known. Forests, grasslands, animals, fire, your group. Everything familiar. Then you take one more step forward and the world just ends. Water. In every direction. More water than you have ever seen in your entire life. Water that moves on its own. Water that makes a sound you've never heard before. Water that goes so far out that it disappears into the sky. You have no word for what you're looking at. No concept, no frame of reference. Nothing in 300,000 years of human experience prepared anyone for this moment. So what happened when ancient humans first saw the ocean? What did they do? What did they think? Did they run? Did they worship it? Did they walk into it? The answer reaches deeper into what it means to be human than almost anything else we know. Let's start with when this actually happened. For most of human history, our ancestors lived inland. The African savanna, dense forests, river valleys. The coastline was not a destination. It wasn't even a concept. Early humans followed food. They followed water. They followed the herds. And for hundreds of thousands of years, that kept them away from the edges of the continent. But around 164,000 years ago, something changed. At a site called Pinnacle Point on the southern coast of South Africa, archaeologists made a discovery that rewrote the timeline of human coastal behavior. Inside a cave system carved into the cliffs above the Indian Ocean, they found evidence of humans living directly on the coast. Shellfish remains, ochre processing tools, hearths. These weren't brief visits. These were people who had figured out the ocean and were using it deliberately. But here's what makes Pinnacle Point so significant. The humans who lived there were there because they had to be. Around 905,000 years ago, a massive climate shift pushed sub-Saharan Africa into a period of intense cold and drought. The interior grasslands dried up. Prey animals disappeared. Plants failed. Population numbers collapsed so severely that geneticists studying human DNA have found evidence of a population bottleneck during this period. The entire human species may have been reduced to just a few thousand individuals. The coast saved us. While the interior turned to dust, the coastline remained productive. The ocean doesn't drought. Shellfish grow on rocks regardless of rainfall. Kelp forests support entire ecosystems even when the land is dying. The humans who survived this bottleneck were almost certainly the ones who found the coast and figured out how to live on it. Which means the first humans to see the ocean weren't tourists. They were refugees. They were starving. Their world was collapsing around them, and they walked to the edge of the land because there was nowhere else left to go. And they looked out at the ocean for the first time and had no idea what they were seeing. Let's think about what that moment actually felt like. Not metaphorically, physically. The human brain is wired to process threat and novelty simultaneously. When you encounter something completely outside your experience, two systems activate at once. The amygdala, your threat detection center, fires immediately. Is this dangerous? Can it eat me? Should I run? At the same time, the prefrontal cortex tries to categorize the new thing. What is this? How do I understand it? For every other thing an ancient human had ever encountered, there was something to compare it to. A new animal resembled other animals. A new plant resembled other plants. A thunderstorm was a bigger version of rain. The ocean resembled nothing. It was flat like a plane, but it moved. It was wet like a river, but it had no edges. It made a rhythmic sound unlike anything in nature. It tasted wrong. It smelled unlike anything inland. The horizon line where water met sky violated every spatial understanding the human brain had developed across a lifetime in forests and grasslands. Neuroscientist David Eagleman has written about how the brain responds to genuinely novel stimuli with something close to system overload. The categorization process fails. The brain keeps searching for a match and finding nothing. This produces a state of profound awe that is physiologically distinct from fear, from pleasure, from excitement. It's its own category of experience. Ancient humans standing at the ocean's edge for the first time were experiencing something they had no name for and no framework to process. And then the ocean moved toward them. The wave. The first wave. Think about what a wave looks like to someone who has never seen one. The water rises. It builds. It moves toward you with apparent intention. It crashes, it reaches toward your feet and then retreats. And then it does it again, and again, rhythmically, endlessly, with a regularity that feels almost alive. We know from studying isolated populations encountering novel phenomena that the initial response to something this far outside experience is almost always stillness. Not running, stillness. The body freezes while the brain attempts to process, then retreat. Then, over minutes or hours, cautious return, and then curiosity. Humans are the most curious species on Earth. This is not a metaphor. Curiosity activates the same reward pathways as food and sex. Finding something new and exploring it produces a measurable dopamine response. This is why children touch everything. This is why humans eventually crossed oceans. Curiosity is hardwired into us at a neurochemical level. So after the initial shock, ancient humans would have moved closer. They would have touched the water, tasted it, recoiled at the salt, watched things move beneath the surface, found shells on the shore, picked them up, turned them over, eventually walked in, and we have evidence for exactly this sequence. At Pinnacle Point and sites along the South African coast, shellfish remains show selective harvesting, not random collection. Specific species chosen at specific times. This means they understood tidal patterns, seasonal availability, and which species were safe to eat. You don't develop that knowledge from a single visit. You develop it across generations of careful observation. They also found perforated shells used as jewelry at Blombo's cave, 75,000 years old. Someone collected shells not for food, but for beauty. They drilled holes through them and wore them. They had moved from terror to appreciation to aesthetic response. That is the full arc of the human relationship with the ocean compressed into the archaeological record. But what did they believe it was? We can't know directly. But we can look at how traditional coastal peoples who encountered the sea within recorded or oral history responded, and the pattern is striking. Almost universally, the ocean was understood as alive, not as a metaphor, literally alive. A being with intention, mood, and power far beyond human understanding. The Andaman Islanders, one of the most isolated populations on Earth, have oral traditions describing the sea as a living ancestor. Aboriginal Australians who first reached the coastline incorporated the ocean into their understanding of the world as a conscious force. The Yup'ik people of Alaska described the sea in traditional stories not as a place, but as a being. This makes complete sense. The ocean breathes. Tides rise and fall on a rhythm that mirrors breathing. It has moods, calm days and violent storms with no obvious cause. It takes people and doesn't give them back. Every behavior ancient humans associated with living things, the ocean exhibited. For a mind with no understanding of lunar gravity or meteorology, the ocean was indistinguishable from a god. And here's the part that connects all of this to you. The humans who first stood at that cliff and looked out at something they couldn't name didn't turn back. They stayed. They figured it out. They learned the tides and the seasons and which rocks had the best shellfish. They passed that knowledge down until eventually their descendants built boats and crossed it. The entire human story of exploration started on a cliff in South Africa 164,000 years ago, with someone standing completely still, staring at something they'd never seen, and deciding not to run. That instinct is still inside you. The same curiosity that pulled them toward the water is the same thing that makes you stop at a viewpoint and stare at a horizon longer than you need to. The same awe, the same pull toward the edge of what you know. You inherited it from the people who survived by walking toward the unknown instead of away from it. And it turned out that was enough.